the 2009 edition of Meet Your Legislators. This is the second of this particular legislature's events that we've had here at the library. Coming up, we have one a month from today, or actually 4 weeks from today, on March 21st. And then the last one will be on April 18th, so you might want to mark your calendars for those. If you want to be kept apprised of these occurring and everything, we would encourage you to sign in at the back of the room and put your email address down so that we can let you know in advance, remind you that this is taking place. And I'll also recognize the sponsors right now. I'll introduce myself. I'm John Blair. I'm the president of the organization Valley Watch. We're one of the sponsors. The Isaac Walton League of America is a sponsor. The Central Library, Plumbers and Pipe Fitters, Sustainable Communities Coalition, Council of Churches, the League of Women Voters, United Neighborhoods of Evansville, the Evansville Teachers Association, Teamsters Local 215, and the Central Labor Temple are all sponsors of what is now working on 40 years at least. I've been here for 36, and we've had these things every legislative session for nearly 40 years. So some of the legislators up here have been here for nearly 40 years. Okay. Yeah, and Senator Dyke has an announcement that he'd like to make real quickly.
Thank you, John. There's been a lot of concerns. And all of us have fielded questions and get emails from people about utility bills. So there is a representative from Veteran back there in the corner, Thea Sewell. Wave your hand, Thea. If anyone has questions concerning energy bills and so forth and assistance, she's back there and she can step out in the hallway and talk to you. She can't access accounts right now, but she can is a very valuable tool to help you find assistance, if anybody needs to. So she's back. She'll be there till 10:30. And Thea, thank you very much for being here today. I really appreciate it, and all the legislators, I'm sure, are happy for you to be here.
What's her name so I can contact her later?
Okay, thank you, Bob. And obviously that is an important problem for many people here in the Evansville area, at least. Jim just held up a sign to me. Announce donations too. We provide some donuts and other health foods for your pleasure here, coffee and orange juice and so forth, and that does cost some money, and there is some money in getting the legislative maps and so forth. So anybody that wants to offer a donation, there's a specific coffee cup over there, I think, that you can drop $1 or $2 in. We'd appreciate it. This is the first time I've been the moderator of a Meet Your Legislators, and I've been coming to these things for a good portion of that 40 years I was talking about, and I've always thought that there was a lot of discourse from this direction this way, and less from this direction this way. So today I'm going to try a little bit of an experiment and go out of the ordinary way of doing things and try to encourage as much discussion so that they can hear what your thoughts are as we can. Obviously, we want to give the legislators a chance to respond to those thoughts. So with that in mind, I'm going to start. There's a group of people that came here from Rockport, Indiana, and they're with a group called Spencer County Citizens for Quality of Life. So I'm going to call upon them because they are kind of new to this game, and they are faced with a unique situation. Rockport, Indiana has two industries in it that put out more toxic chemicals than, or at least about the same amount of toxic chemicals, at 37 million pounds a year, as the state of California. Rockport has a population of 2,091. The state of California has a population of about 30 million. toxic chemical releases are about the same. It's pretty amazing. So I'm going to start with Bill Simon over here, and then there's at least two of those people who'd like to say a few words, and then one other person, primarily about Senate Bill 423.
John, tell them to wait for this.
Yes.
Where is it?
Thank you. Appreciate the opportunity to come down. Like you mentioned, we are new at this game, so we're not coming with a 15-minute presentation or anything like that. As you mentioned, our group has just been organized probably, in the last 6 months, fellas? And so we're trying to get up to speed on all the issues, 423, but the syngas proposed on our counter in particular. One thing I want to be sure that we understand is I know there are some people in the legislature that believe that there's a lot of broad local support up in the county for this project, and I am here to tell you that is not the case. And as we do continue to get more organized and understand how we got to communicate better, you will be seeing that. It is not widely locally supported, and we'll get there. You did mention some points. I mean, what we believe is this is just a big old Trojan horse, and we think this horse smells. And as we get further along, we're going to try to understand that. You've mentioned health issues. You know, there is we're one of the most leading toxic emissions in the state. There's the proposed site has non-attainment. We have a legacy up there from 20 years ago called Barmet that had many of the same proposals. It was going to be this panacea. Everything was going to be great. We were going to have jobs. It was going to be clean. It was clean, all those type of things. And we found here that even this proposed site doesn't want this 120 acres. So there's a lot of health issues that we're going to learn more about, and we're going to learn how to communicate that more. But we are fearful of the facts. There is a problem. On the economic side, we believe it to be voodoo economics. I mean, one of the things that they talk about is at the end of the day, you got a business proposition that has a product, syngas, and that is and it will continue to be competitive with other alternatives. And we don't believe that to be the case. When you start looking a year and a half ago, I believe the governor or the commission with the governor was saying this was going to be a $1.5 billion project. Here it is a year or so later, and it's a 2.1. Other projects like this have already been running into overruns. So the numbers keep changing. And if this is such a great economic business deal, why is it not being funded primarily by private investment? You can go out to Las Vegas and see, $3.3 billion to $4 billion being invested in hotels on gambling. They're on gambling, but we can't get private investment to invest in a project like this. Why is that not the case? Is there not money to be made? The biggest risk is going to be, to the taxpayer, which then comes down to ratepayers. It seems like that's voodoo. If it's that good of a project, why isn't private investment in there? And why does it assume that it's competitive now when already in the last 6-8 months, perhaps the last year, the economics they were talking about being competitive with natural gas has already changed? That economic advantage has probably changed by 50% or less or more. Jobs. We've heard about jobs. Well, these jobs in the past, again, whether we talk about Barmet or recently as AK, the impression is that's going to be a lot of Spencer County jobs. That's never been the fact and hasn't been the fact. They talk about the impact of on our property taxes is going to be we're going to have a boom in that. We're going to have all these economic advantages to our local community. We've heard that too since Barmet up to AK. These jobs that have come have not stayed in Spencer County. They've not brought some kind of great growth and economic wealth to our county. Those profits and those jobs, they've gone outside the county. They go across the river and they go up north. The profits from this aren't going to stay in our county. They're going to go somewhere else. And so as we get better informed and better understand how the process works, we feel that we're going to be able to prove that there's economic voodoo in this. And that's about all. Thank you.
Mr. Obermeyer?
Put the mic on.
It says it's on.
Thank you very much. One thing that Bill Young did not mention was a report by Dr. J that came out 2 years ago where he spoke to the Indiana General Assembly. In that report, he said that the health cost in Indiana to Indiana residents from coal-fired plants is about $5 billion per year. and that Dr. J is the head of the Department of Public Health at Indiana University. I spoke with Dr. J several times this summer and asked him if he felt those numbers were still. Yes, he did. And if you would like to contact him, he's in Indianapolis at the Indiana University School of Medicine. On a different tack, I think it's very understandable that people want jobs. These are economic hard times. And I would like to say I think there are alternative solutions. Indiana is blessed geologically in having their cities, many of their cities located on what's called, in geologic terms, glacial fluvial deposits. By the way, I know of what I speak there. I'm a retired field geologist from the U.S. Geological Survey. I'm also an earthquake engineer. So anyhow, cities like Evansville, Vincennes, parts of Indianapolis, Lafayette are on these glacial fluvial deposits. And they are just absolutely great for geothermal deposits, for geothermal energy. In fact, my brother at Rockport just installed a system this past fall. And he figures he has a hardware store there, about 30,000 square feet. It's about a 30-year-old building. And he figures he's going to pay for that system in about 7 years. His utility bills have gone from $1,100 a month to about half that. And then he figures after 7 years, after it's paid for, he's going to have 25 years of basically free energy from that system. The other thing I think that you should look at, by the way, there are lots of those glacial fluvial deposits in Indiana, and to install those things would provide lots of jobs. And I don't know why that's not being utilized right now. As a matter of fact, DePaul University is installing a geothermal system right now, and they're going to heat their entire campus using that approach. The other thing I think that people should look at seriously is the production of algae, of petrochemicals like biodiesel and gasoline from algae. In some views, it's experimental, but there are production cases of production where gasoline is being produced, or biodiesel is being produced right now at the rate of about 10,000 barrels a day. So the beauty of those systems is that they take the effluent gases from coal-fired plants and feed them to the algae. Algae love to eat on CO2. And the algae also capture a lot of the bad things that come out, the sulfates and nitrates and things like that. So it has a dual function. And I would urge that our legislators look very closely at doing such a thing. By the way, the state of Kentucky is already doing so, and so why isn't Indiana? Thank you very much.
Sir, what's involved, the glacial fluid deposits, what's involved in getting to those?
You have to drill a shallow well. At Rockport, my brother drilled 2 wells about 100 feet apart, 60 feet deep. And you have to get down into the sands and gravels, the water-laden sands and gravels in these glacial fluvial deposits, and you pump it out through one well. You run it through your heat exchange system, which is just like a heat pump, and then you pump it. You get the heat out of it, and then you put it back into the other well. That works, by the way, for both heating and air conditioning.
Are the deposits such that you can heat a lot of areas, or are they kind of concentrated?
Oh, yeah. As a matter of fact, my brother had a group from Vincennes install the system, and they've been putting that system into very large commercial buildings up at Vincennes. Oh, yeah. As a matter of fact, it works best for large buildings, for large commercial facilities. Yes.
Go ahead.
I think in the 2007-2009 budget 2 years ago, we authorized the construction of several power plants for the universities. And Ball State, I think, is about a $40 million project. And we've not released the money yet, but they came to the Budget Committee members, of which I'm a member of, and they asked to change that authorization from the fossil fuel plant that they were building they were wanting permission to build, to a geothermal facility. And they're really going to dig hundreds of wells scattered all over a lot of acreage, but you can continue to function and do your thing on the surface, but those geothermal wells, those wells will go down very, I don't know what depth, but pretty significant depth.
Very deep, yes.
And it'll provide energy for the entire campus at Ball State. So these things are happening. It's just not happening in isolated places. These things are happening now, are starting to happen in Indiana. It's a great idea.
A quick response. I don't think that system is particularly efficient. I think this utilization of the water in these glacial fluvial deposits is much more efficient than the Ball State system. Yeah.
We can discuss that in greater detail after the meeting with individuals. Gail, if you could wait for just a second, I want to recognize Veronica Reese. She was wanting to say something on this specific issue too.
Well, this is about Senate Bill 423, which will be yet another coal-fired plant in Indiana. Our part of Indiana, as many of you know, has the highest concentration of coal-fired power plants in the world. So what does that mean as far as our health is concerned? What it means is coal-fired power plants emit mercury. Mercury is a potent neurotoxin. Okay. When I was teaching 40 years ago in Evansville, first and second graders, I had large classes of over 40 children in each class. I cannot name but one child in each class nobody had asthma. Nobody was going out for medications. I was teaching first and second graders. I remember only one child that maybe could have been diagnosed as having learning disabilities. Now, I'm sure that anybody here who works for the Warwick County school system or the Vanderburgh County school system will tell you that it's a very different story today. You know, these children's brains are being harmed. It's a neurotoxin. They can't help their hyperactivity. Not many people, but some people I know who used to live here and have moved back here. I have a friend who moved back here from Vermont. She said, "Can't you see how dirty the air is?" We don't see it. I think we would get serious about this if we could actually see the particulate matter coming from these coal-fired power plants. But we're so used to it, we don't see it. So Senate Bill 423 is a bad idea. Mercury is a potent neurotoxin. It's harming our children's brains. It's harming pregnant women. We need to get rid of the coal-fired power plants. As you're hearing from these gentlemen here, we have a lot better ways to develop energy in this area.
Okay, thank you. Now, Gail.
Just a comment. There is a bill that passed out of the House that goes to the Senate that is for tax credits for retrofitting for geothermal. And it came out of these efforts that DePaul University is conducting. And Representative Nancy Michael is the author. And if you want to get me your information afterward, I can get you the bill so you can support it. Thank you.
Thank you for coming today, and I'm actually on the Utilities Committee that heard this bill, and I actually voted for it. And I'm going to explain a little bit about this. And you're the first ones who came and opposed this, other than one person at State House. So I'm glad you came here, and feel free to come up. I mean, to me, nobody's talked to me about this at all, and I'm on that committee. Now, let me explain something to you. This plant is unlike any other plant that you see, whether you're for or against it. Unlike the Duke Energy Edwardsport plant, this does not make electricity. It makes synthetic natural gas, or substitute natural gas. And it's going to put it back in the pipeline. Now, what's so rare about this particular plant, no matter where it goes, is that it's going to use federal money at a very, very low interest. And that's why they can do that. Now, no private industry could do this because it costs way too much money. But they're going to be able to get this money for anywhere from 0 to 3 or 4% interest over 20 years and utilize that money to build this plant and make this substitute natural gas. I guess the standpoint I'm looking at, and most people on the committee looks at, is, okay, it's not clean coal, but it's a lot cleaner than any other coal plant you'll see. So I just want to make a comment about that also. But I'll feel free to come to me afterwards and talk about this. But I look at it as a great job opportunity for our area. I think it's a different way of looking at natural gas and locking in prices, other than looking at fluctuating prices. So, I mean, it's got a long way to go. It's going to go to the House next, and they're going to really, look at this and work on this. But I think it's something new. I think there's one other plant in the United States like this right now, and I understand your concerns too. But feel free to talk to me after this meeting.
How many people today are here from Spencer County? Would you raise your hands? Okay. We appreciate you being here, and I would encourage you to contact the people that represent you, including Representative Crouch, represents part of Spencer County, and I know she's sick, has been with bronchitis pneumonia this last week, so we're just hoping that she gets better real quick because she has really been sick. The other person that represents you is Russ Stillwell, who you all know, and Russ has supported this in the past, so I would encourage you to contact him. I would also encourage you to contact Senator Young, Richard Young, who also represents Spencer County, and we do appreciate you being here. Haven't decided what I'm going to do yet on this bill. I've opposed it in the past, but I do appreciate your input because this has been around before. This is not a brand new issue. So I guess my concern would be, and I've asked for information about this, how it affects ratepayers in the future. That's my concern. In addition to some of the environmental issues, I mean, if it's cleaner coal than what we normally have, that's a positive. But what I'm concerned about is the long-term cost, potential cost to ratepayers. So if any of you have information on that, please feel free to email us with that information. And my email address is on one of these in the back. There's some back there, but it's s50@in.gov.
Okay, thank you. And I appreciate the crowd indulging me on one of the issues that I hold dear to my heart. I'll open up to the floor. Generally speaking, the way we've done this in the past is that you'll have 3 minutes and people up here will have a chance to respond. But
okay.
We'll see how
my name is Marjorie Jones, and I'm the 8th District's representative on the Heritage Trust Project Committee, so kind of following into the environmental theme we have going here. That spends the environmental license plate money, but what I would particularly like to do is to thank Dennis Avery on behalf of the Heritage Trust Project Committee for the appropriation that's in the current budget, which I hope will continue, and I hope that all of you will continue to support the Heritage Trust Project appropriation as it goes through the legislative process. I will remind you that Heritage Trust monies have been spent in large amounts in Warwick County. We have added property to Angel Mounds in Vanderburgh County. We have projects in Pike County, in Gibson County, lots of projects in Posey County. And so your money has been spent in this part of the state to provide land for parks, recreation areas, fish and wildlife areas, nature preserves, and historic sites, including, for example, at Vincennes, up in New Harmony, and Angel Mounds. So, and I would also like to remind you that this is that tourism, which comes from this, not only contributes to our quality of life, but tourism is non-polluting. It hires local people. It brings money into your community, and it can't be moved to China. I would also add that I've been concerned about taking Heritage Trust, taking some of the entities out of DNR that get Heritage Trust money, which is Senate Bill 524, and I communicated this concern to several of you in emails, and I have other materials that I have communicated to various state people on this subject, because that might make it difficult for historic sites to continue to use the Heritage Trust money. And so I have some major concerns with that bill that's going through right now.
That was Senate Bill 524. I saw Dennis and Vanita.
Thank you, Marjorie, and thank you for your kind words. The budget, the recommendations that we received from the governor's office and from the Indiana Budget Committee, which it passed, the budget recommendations passed 3-2, and I was one of the 2 no votes, basically eliminated the state appropriation for the Indiana Heritage Trust. And in the House, Ways and Means passed Budget Committee, which I think the newspapers called it plumping this morning. We plumped it a little bit, and we gave $1 million to the Indiana Heritage Trust, and that's to help supplement the money that we currently receive from the license plate, the environmental license plate that many of us have purchased over the years and many of us continue to use. But we put $1 million in that. That's less than you received 2 years ago. In the last budget, it was $2 million, but nevertheless, it's a lot better than nothing. And I think it's important that we supplement the amount of money we can use, and I think it's 2-point-something million for the license plate, which is also down somewhat in that less people are buying that plate, since we now have 150 plates, I think, but it's an exaggeration, of course. But anyhow, it's important, and I hope that the Senate keeps the language in there, and I believe they will. I know I've spoken to some of the majority members of the Appropriations Committee, and they like the Heritage Trust, and we set aside endangered land that's about to be gobbled up to development, set aside that for our children and our children's children. It's an important issue.
Senator Becker?
I was just going to say, I talked to Marjorie a couple days ago about Senate Bill 524 and talked to the author. They do have a 74-page amendment.
I know.
And I talked to the governor's office because Senator Merritt, it's his bill, and he had said he thought that the governor's office, supposedly this year, this bill's been around a long time, was supposed to have gone around and talked to all the various interested parties. And that's why I think the bill got out of committee prematurely before they could get to. But this week was the deadline for committee hearings, so they kind of had to move some stuff and then work on it on second reading. So there is a 74-page amendment. I've talked with David Pippin with the governor's office. In fact, I talked to him yesterday morning, and he said that the amendment should address your concerns as far as law enforcement, and the amendment also makes these sites eligible for the Heritage Trust. So just wanted to share that with you.
Okay, the way we've done it in the past is to switch sides of the aisle, so the first hand I saw was yours.
Thank you. My name is Carol Davis. It's beyond the pale to me that the Family and Social Service Administration, FSSA, can go on a self-promotional tour duping the public into believing it's trying to solve the problems with the welfare application process. Because of misdeeds and corruptions, Indiana has led the whole United States in cases of child abuse, neglect, and child abuse deaths. Most of these cases were under the watch of FSSA. What's really happening is the FSSA was our largest state agency. 10,000 plus was broken up by Governor Daniels. FSSA naturally is fighting the loss of power. What we have going on here with the FSSA and the legislators is collective bargaining at its worst. And the fact both political parties have been manipulated in protecting the jobs for FSSA for decades instead of the prevention of abuse and deaths of children is unconscionable. The Indianapolis Star has been the only news media that has done any real investigative stories. The legislators are well aware of the failures of FSSA reported by the Star. Politics and bureaucratic incompetency is destroying our children. Sadly, we can add 2 more child abuse deaths within a month right here in Evansville. Children after birth should have a right to life. If the legislators really want to be heroic, have USI or IU, for example, do a comprehensive study of the child welfare system. There are only 2 reasons for the continual failure of the well-being of our most precious and innocents: ignorance and indifference. In a nutshell, Indiana is equivalent to the octuplet mom. Thank you.
Yes?
Thank you, and Carol, thank you for being here. Of course, we both agree about the problem, that we have a very serious problem, and we've always had, and we will continue to have serious problems in society as parents commit violence against their children, and however, we need to do all we can to make sure that that we have a system in place to investigate, that society reports it when they're aware of it, and that we follow up on it. First of all, FSSA has nothing to do with of child abuse investigation. That's the Department of Child Services.
But it was all the same before.
4 years ago, it was separated, and we created a separate Department of Child Services, and the director is Jim Payne. We doubled the caseworkers, putting 800 new caseworkers into the system, and at a tremendous cost. And I've, on several occasions, applauded. I disagree with this administration a lot, and I criticize them a lot. But in the area of the Department of Child Services, they've done a good job. They've hired a director, Judge Jim Payne from Indianapolis. He's beefed up the agency. We now the child abuse law is in compliance with federal standards, which is something I've been working on for years. Adequate caseworkers to meet national standards, which is something I've been working on for years, and also one of the big things that's historically been missing is the inadequate training of social workers and caseworkers, and that's taking place now. And it always astonishes me that you can do all the things apparently right, and yet parents still kill their children, and I don't know what we can do about that, but I hope that we continue to make important strides. And I'm not going to be critical of the administration in this area because I think they've worked very hard and they've done a very good job we just passed a DCS budget yesterday, and it passed, I think, only 8 no votes in the House, and that's kind of incredible for a budget in the House when we all agree. And the reason we didn't agree is because it was a 1-year budget as opposed to a 2-year budget. And even most Republicans even supported the 1-year budget. But I think that's and there's one other thing: collective bargaining. Our state employees do not have a right to bargain collectively anymore. That was taken away by the governor. I disagree with the governor on that one, but nevertheless, that's another issue that is not a factor right now. But perhaps it has been, and perhaps it will be in the future. But I don't believe a factor in this particular instance, at least.
Senator Becker.
I really think that Dennis has covered it, but I just wanted to echo the fact that we now have the Department of Child Services is separated. FSSA has nothing to do with this issue any longer. They do have a lot to do with a lot of other issues that they're messing up and creating a lot of problems on, and it's Medicaid and food stamps and temporary assistance for needy families. Through their so-called modernization proposal of paying IBM and ACS $1.6 billion over 10 years to privatize the system, and it has not. In fact, it's just gotten horrible. And I have to applaud Representative Crouch and Representative Crawford in the House for their work on this issue, and I've been working on this with FSSA directly. They have a new administrator, Ann Murphy, and I think she's very sincere in her efforts to improve, and has said she will delay rolling out any more of the so-called modernization to other counties until they fix the problems. At least they finally admit, after about a year and a half, that they have problems, and you can't fix it if you don't first admit you have a problem. So I think that's positive. But as far as, I think unfortunately we're always going to have a problem. Somebody said to me recently that we should require a test for all people before they have children, just to ensure that they will be good parents. Unfortunately, that's not likely to happen, but it is a problem, and I share your concern. And I think that separating the Department of Child Services out and hiring caseworkers, and this was certainly something that a good friend of mine worked for in the legislature for so many years to make sure that we met national standards. But it's still a problem. There's no doubt about it, because unfortunately, there is no training before someone decides to have a child. And there is no training after that if they don't decide to get the training or the help that they need to be better parents.
Okay. Yes. Yeah.
Just a comment about, I think I mentioned to you about the victims' rights and the bill that we didn't get through, but we're going to get through on, hopefully, in the Senate about juvenile confessions. But Regarding victims' rights, that was actually brought by Mike Perry, deputy prosecutor here, and there needs to be stronger opportunities, I should say, to have successful prosecution. And the Section 3 that I think we finally worked on, that we have agreement with the public defenders as well as the prosecutors' council, will provide increased procedures where there should be less intimidation of young children, which is a serious problem to get them to recant and change their stories. So hopefully we'll see some progress in that. It comes up for second reading and third reading this week, and then it's on to the Senate, and we might have a sponsor sitting here at the table in the Senate. I'll talk to her later.
Could you just have USI do some kind of study since you work there about this?
Well, of course, I have nothing.
IU did one and nobody paid any attention.
Well, I'm not sure they'll do any more with the USI study than they did with the IU study, but I think people do look at these studies. We've had a number of studies done over the years, and IU really is one of our foremost leaders in this area through the SPIA program, and they do outstanding work, and we do listen to them, and we read those reports, and we'll continue to improve the system. And I think that's one of the reasons the system has been improved. And but it's just amazing sometimes when you see a child what really upsets me is when a child is in the system, they've been reported to have been abused or neglected, they've been taken from the home, and then they're returned, and because they think they've done all they can to improve the situation in the family. The parents have gone to the training, and yet the kid gets killed. And that really upsets me when that kind of thing happens, but it does, and I'm not sure what the answer is, but we need to keep working, and hopefully we'll someday have a society where those kind of things don't happen. But I'm afraid that's not here today, because I was just reading the paper the other day when a child here in Evansville died again, and that's so upsetting.
Okay, on with the next one. I recognize the man here.
Thank you. My name is Jim Toms, and I want to thank all of the legislators for taking the time to be here with us this morning. I've got a comment that I wrote down. These are my words. I normally don't read off of paper, but I didn't want to go any longer than I should, and I don't want to leave nothing out. Appreciate you listening to us here today. But my wife and I was up at the State House a week ago last Wednesday, and we were sitting in on committee hearings. And you get the sense that there's a disconnect once legislators get back to the State House. And so these are my comments. And my comments are directed to the General Assembly and not just to those who are here. But federal government is now a galaxy far removed from the American citizens. Federal legislators are virtually inaccessible outside of the election cycles. Form letters and responses to questions and comments are impossible to get. State and local government is more reachable, but nonetheless has also become disconnected from the individuals whom they are to serve. Never in the history of this nation has this attitude become more blatant than it has in just the past few months. From opposition to federal bailout on down to proposed arena, the wishes of the public were noted but not heeded. The statesman is a scarce individual. In place, we now have a political body that ignores the limits the Constitution imposes on government. Too many disregard their oath of office and refuse to allow the laws of God and the Constitution to guide them in their daily decisions that impact the liberty and freedom of the citizen. The statement does not necessarily require a rebuttal, but I do respectfully hope that tonight when each of you close your eyes to sleep, these words will still ring in your minds. I will end with a quote from our first president, George Washington. Government is not reason, it is not eloquent, it is like fire, it is a dangerous servant and a fearful master. Thank you.
Trent?
Well, Jim, obviously, I know you pay attention to what's going on in your government as well you should, as well as all of us should. And appreciate the comments. It's not really a rebuttal. It is interesting. The one thing that I found to be most interesting going up to the State House is you're one of 100. And you're one of 100 in a very large state. And you do everything you can to remember, everyone back home. But at the same time, you also try to remember to at least listen, because there are different folks across this state. I mean, people don't see things the same way in Gary, Indiana, that we see them down here in Posey County, Indiana. And that's probably the toughest part about the job, is not only advocating what you know your constituents are looking for, but also understanding that those folks in other parts of the state are advocating for the way they see it. And that's what I found to be the most challenging, is to take all those differences, that diversity that we have, and try to find a solution that's going to help everyone in that diverse world. And it's not easy. It's not easy when you're dealing with 1,500 different House bills and a couple of hundred Senate bills coming over, to sort through all that. The one thing I can say is, and also when you're sitting up there spending 10 hours at the State House with a part-time person helping you try to get back in touch with your constituents. So obviously never hesitate to contact me or anybody else. And I always try to listen, whether I know I don't agree with everyone, because that would be impossible. I can think of just one bill that we did this year or just week, that probably had 200 emails on, and it was probably split down the middle 50-50 in terms of support or oppose. But I think that the thing we all have to remember, is a point you brought out, is we go up there with a basic foundation that has kept this country in place for more than 200 years. And you can't forget that basic foundation that got us to where we are today, and I think will continue to carry us through.
Okay, I'm going to switch to this side this time. Man in a green shirt back in the corner there. No, not quite the corner. Corner of this side of the room.
I'm Rob Canori from up at Princeton, Indiana. I realize Representative Battles and Senator Hume's not here, but first of all, there's a lot of coal mines up there, and just kind of my comment for what was said earlier. You're going to put a lot of families down the tubes if you close those coal mines. The power plant out there, we're talking lots and lots of jobs. You guys don't stop and think. When you close those, we're talking 4 and 5 generations of families that have been in those coal mines supporting, buying groceries, putting money into the economy. You got to stop and think about that before you just scratch it off the bottom line. You can't do that. I'm all for clean coal. We got scrubbers out there at the power plant that they put in several years ago. That's good for the environment. I'm not against that, but don't go writing legislation just to close something down because you think that, there's all kinds of technology that can take care of this problem with if somebody's got breathing problems or health problems. Enough said about that, but this last bill that the president signed, it allows for state legislators to go around the governor to take this bailout money. And I'm not going to pick on anybody up there, but I want to know where you guys stand. Are you going to go around the governor and take this money? I want to know. Let's have an answer.
I'm not sure that was a question of a. Was there a specific bill that you had in mind as far as?
Are you not aware of that?
Okay. We'll go with.
Start at the end, go.
Gail, do you have? I couldn't see if you.
Yes, that's fine. I'll start. We do have a stimulus bill that incorporates projects on a local level. And I don't know whether you consider that going around the governor. I'm not sure how to respond to that.
No, it's at the state level, man, not just local level. I'm talking about up at the state house.
She's talking about that.
He was signing the law.
Yeah, that's what I'm talking about.
We've got two situations here. Obviously, the Congress just passed a federal stimulus bill. What was it, $787 billion or something like that? I think that was the number. That is directed towards the states. One of the questions about that is who directs where that money goes. Does it go to the governor? Does the governor direct it? Does the legislature direct it? From my standpoint, is I want to know where that money is intended to go, and is it going to be used for the right things? One thing that I've seen in the past couple of years, which concerns me, is the legislature has passed budgets basically saying we appropriate X amount of dollars for this particular project, to build something on a university campus or somewhere else. And for the past couple years, the executive branch has not carried that out. They have basically not pocketed, but they have kept that project from moving forward. So if the governor basically hoards the money that can go back to communities to put people to work, then I think it would be appropriate for the legislature to go around him to make sure we put people back to work and that money is not used for purposes that should not be used for. The money is supposed to stimulate the economy. You stimulate the economy by putting people to work so they have jobs, they have paychecks, they can spend that paycheck and cause other people to go to work. One of the things Representative Rican was also, I think, trying to address is House Bill 1656, which passed out of the House, and what we have done is a state stimulus package, if you will, in taking some of the federal highway dollars and other dollars going towards road projects and trying to get them moving quicker than what they are right now, so that we can put people out there to work and improving our infrastructure, and with an improved infrastructure, hopefully you become more attractive to other businesses improving their businesses.
I personally feel like that's a bad idea, taking any kind of Washington, D.C. money.
Okay.
I think we have enough resources here in the state, and we have enough head knowledge that we can put people to work without even messing around with Washington, D.C. I think it's a bad idea. We're going to be dancing with the devil before you know it, and that's not anything we want to do.
Dennis?
Thank you. Well, you know, our tax dollars, our taxpayers, our taxpayers send tax dollars to Washington, D.C., and I understand that the issue of the stimulus package, how important it is to create jobs in the state of Indiana. I was just looking a while ago at my questionnaire response, and by far the number one issue is not refusing to spend tax dollars or spend money that's coming from the federal. The number one issue is creating jobs in the state of Indiana. We have a lot of people hurting. In Elkhart County, we have a 15% unemployment rate, and they don't have the ability to just magically create those jobs. But as far as going around the governor, we don't have a system of going around the governor. The governor and the state legislature, we have a legislative branch and an executive branch, and the House and the Senate working together will pass a budget. Hopefully, and the governor then either signs it or he doesn't. But we have a responsibility of appropriating monies that are available. We can't just ignore that. We have a responsibility of funding road construction, bridge construction. We don't want to see what happened to St. Paul, Minnesota, where a bridge collapsed, killing numerous people because the infrastructure was lacking. We have a responsibility to make sure that doesn't happen in the state of Indiana. We have people unemployed. For example, the state of Indiana is $330 million in debt right now. We had to borrow $330 million from the federal government to pay our unemployment compensation claims. We owe another $50 million in the same way for interest on that money. And so we have a responsibility of devising a system to make sure that unemployment compensation benefits are provided to people that need help. When people need food, we have a responsibility of making sure they don't starve. And so some of that stimulus money is to be used for some of these programs. And I know I was looking at the $28 million is coming to the state of Indiana for homelessness problems and homelessness prevention, which is a very serious problem in the state of Indiana, in spite of the fact that we sometimes ignore that. And we're trying to devise a system of creating a formula to distribute that money. And we will propose something to the governor. We will work with the governor. Democrats can't do this by themselves. Republicans in the Senate are going to have to work with us. The governor's going to have to work with us, and we're always concerned that it's not going to work out in the end, but it will. We'll do this in a bipartisan way of passing these bills and appropriating the money that we receive from the federal government.
Senator Becker?
I guess, I'm not sure whether or not the stimulus package at the federal level was a good idea, but it's here. And I'm not sure that what the alternative would have been. And I hate the fact that we are going to have debt so far into the future. It really concerns me about what this is going to do to the debt of the future of children and grandchildren. But it has happened. It's done. So now you just have to hope that it works. And it's not going to be easy and it's not going to be quick. Should Indiana just refuse to take $4 billion? Well, let me tell you something. You know, let me just say something. It's my turn. It's my turn. You may feel that way, and the governor was not, he said he was against the stimulus package, but I don't see him saying no to the federal government. Because our taxpayers also paid into that money that was appropriated, and it ought to come back. Some of it ought to come back here rather than sending it to other states. And that's the reality. It's going to. What he hopes to do with it, and some of that money, he will have a big say-so over, just because of the strings that are attached to that money, and some of it schools will get directly, and some of it will go through the legislative process. So it's going to be, we're still looking at what all the rules are and the regulations for even distributing that money. And so it is going to take a bipartisan effort to work to make sure that it gets to the right places. I know that Evansville-Vandenberg School Corporation, in the preliminary data, they're going to get $12 million. That money will probably prevent a lot of layoffs in schools throughout the state that otherwise would have happened had the stimulus package not happened. And so, I'm not sure it was a good idea, but it's passed. And so we have to deal with the reality of it.
Senator Doug?
Well, thank you for your question. I think it's the hopes of everyone sitting up here, and I believe it's the hopes of everyone sitting out there. If we receive the money, we want to have proper oversight of that money. We want to make sure that everybody is treated equal with that money. We don't want all the money to go to Indianapolis or Lake County. We want to make sure our rural areas get just as much money equally as everyone else does. So I think it's very important that we have oversight of the money, not just the governor hand out the money, not just the legislature. We all have to work together to make sure all the money is equally distributed and used for rural areas just like it is in urban areas.
Fairly distributed. Okay. You've been trying to get my attention for a while here.
And we just have a quick question. It's more to address an issue, and I have it written here. Given that home birth is legal in all 50 states and that most certified nurse midwives do not attend home births, and that there are no certified nurse midwives south of Indianapolis that attend home births, basically, what are we going to do to ensure that consumers have the safest option for home delivery? And, of course, you guys recently heard of Bill 508 that addressed some midwifery legislation. So, thank you.
Okay. Who would like to?
Senate Bill 508 was heard in the Health Committee this week. There was a lot of testimony for the bill. There was a lot of testimony against the bill. One of our local neonatologist, Maria Del Rio Hoover, was strongly opposed to the bill. She works with babies that are born that have lots of difficulties, and the concern raised by the medical community is that if you run into a problem with a at-home birth, you don't have time to get the help for those people and for the mothers and the babies. So, I mean, there's just always two sides to an issue, as you know, sometimes more. But the chairman decided not to take a vote, so the bill was not voted on. So I would say it's dead for this session. Not to say that home births won't continue, because they will, and there are women that do home births, and I think that people ought to have that option. I just think it should be as safe as possible, and I guess that's where the concern was. How do you make sure that it's safe? And I know that there were some amendments, but I think that the chairman just decided, and it was her call, Senator Miller not to take a vote on that bill.
Anyone else? Okay, I'm going to go back to this side, right here in front.
Move back just in time.
Stan McGill. We've heard a bit of discussion this morning about how the state may propose to handle large sums of money coming from the federal government. But I think we can look into recent history to see how the state has handled the $2.8 billion in lease funds for the toll road in northern Indiana to kind of figure out what they might do with these other large sums of money. My question to you is, what happened to the $2.8 billion? I know some of it has been committed to road construction, but my concern is, was it invested? Did it go into the stock market? Was it lost? Was there hedge funds involved? And what happens to the large sums of money that the state receives?
Dennis is on the Ways and Means Committee.
Well, they are spending it down over a 10-year period of time. That's what it's designed. I didn't vote for major moves, but I'm not going to be critical of the program because it's passed, it's the law, and they are. It would be impossible, for one thing, to spend it all in 1 year. We don't have enough contractors to build that many roads, and so the administration is spending. I think it's about $700 million a year, and they did invest it, but they did not. By law, they were not allowed to put it in the more risky investments. They didn't lose a lot of money, but they also didn't get a lot of money. Our experience is that it's greatly under what they estimated it would be as far as return on investment. But nevertheless, it wasn't in the stock market, which is what many of our pensions are in, and we have, as someone said the other day, we don't have anyhow, I can't think of the quote, but anyhow, it's not in the more risky investments. So we just receive a minimal amount of return on that investment. But I think this year's budget does include several $100 million in spending in the major moves accounts for projects really throughout the state of Indiana, and over that 10-year period of time, it should be all gone and all spent on various projects.
Are those reports available to private citizens?
I think so. I think you can get that through Indiana Department of Transportation because they gave us a report on it, but they reported to us. I'm not sure it was actually a written report they gave us, but they reported to us in the Ways and Means a few weeks ago, and on that particular issue. But I know you can get the projects that are online to be built this year and next year and the year after, and I believe you can also get the investment information through Indiana Department of Transportation.
Senator Doug?
That's a very good question you have there. So I don't know if I can actually answer your question, but we've asked for those figures from that $2.8 billion. I haven't received that as of yet. There are concerns that money was invested in some bad junk bonds, things like that, just like a lot of pension funds are invested in things like that. And some of our pensions have dropped or lost anywhere from 25 to 45 to 50% recently. And I assume we have lost quite a bit of money, that investment also. It's just like everyone else having money in retirement accounts, and there's probably a lot of retirees here right now who's lost a significant amount of money, and their retirement checks are, substantially much lower. So it's a good question. We've asked for those figures to see how much we have lost, but we haven't received those figures back yet.
Yes.
If
Trent?
you're looking to see how the money was invested, you'll also want to check with the state treasurer's office. I know one of the...
But are they transparent? They won't
release those. And what I was going to say, one of the difficulties we've had, and I was talking earlier about House Bill 1656, which we're trying to ramp up the infrastructure road building projects. In talking with the author of that bill, one of the frustrations she's had is she's not getting clear answers to her questions about what money we have available and those amounts, what funds they come from, and if it's okay, just maybe not picking up, but how it was invested in things of that nature. One of the difficulties we're running into with the major move money is they were projecting, I think, a 6.9% return on their investments, and it has been nowhere near that. So when you're counting on building a road 15 years from now with money that you're going to earn over that period of time, in 15 years you're not going to have that money. So you have the same questions many of us have in terms of not getting straight answers on how that money was
So
invested.
have you learned anything? What you're going to do with this federal money now? You're going to do the same thing with it?
Well, I think one of the things in terms of saying what my mic's not working. If that's the problem, you knocked over my empty cup. Kemp's Donut Bank cup. Fine coffee and donuts on the west side of Evansville.
You got 3.
Okay. This one's working. Okay. Would you like another cup? No, I'm not moving it. It's the channel. You asked if we've learned anything. I think one of the things maybe that we've learned is greater transparency. One of the criticisms I have from the major moves money is that it was basically dealt with solely through the executive branch. And there was not, to my satisfaction, not enough transparency in terms of the investment and spending of that money. So some of this federal money that is going to, I think it was mentioned earlier, is we've got to make sure there's certain oversight. We've also got to make sure that if it is to be spent, that it's just not one branch spending that, because when you consolidate that kind of authority into one branch, you're asking for trouble. So in terms of any lessons learned from that, those would be the lessons that I would say I've learned.
Okay. Gail, go ahead.
Thank you. I would also mention that one of the things that we did learn, or that I'm pretty sure is accurate, is that looking through the PERF, the state funds, found that there were investments that were in hedge funds, which is pretty scary. And I don't think it ever did that before. It was really conservative. But that needs to, we need to have some more oversight where that's concerned. I think oversight is probably a key word that we have seen in the legislature this year, whether it's FSSA or it's mortgage lending or it's how we invest our money. You're going to see that the legislature, in my opinion, is becoming very involved and is requiring that, and you're going to see some more, I'm sure.
Okay. Representative Avery?
I just wanted to also add to what Trent said, because he's absolutely right, that there's another problem with the major moves money is that they're always changing their minds on projects. For example, they added $50 million for a turnaround in Carmel. That was not on the original list. They added another, I believe it's $40 to $50 million, where they built the new Honda plant in eastern Indiana. And that was not on the list, but that was in order to get the economic opportunity that was available at the time. So these things are always changing, and that's one of the problems when some people suggest that we just let the government decide everything. When you just let one person decide everything, it's one of the problems, and you do need input. The other problem with having the legislative directive alone is we can't agree. It's pretty incredible when you see the battle that takes place over appropriating money, and it's an awesome sight. And as we try to get our pet projects into the budget, and other people want theirs, and it's very difficult. But I hope we've learned a few things from this, and that this is important. But we all should be involved, and local government needs to be involved too. States should make all these decisions. Local government governments have a lot of projects that they want to fund that are important, and they need to have input also.
Senator Becker?
This is probably redundant, but I do think that oversight is the key. And I think that is what concerns me most about the federal stimulus package, the debt, but also the oversight. Because if you don't have oversight, we're still trying to figure out what happened to the first stimulus package. There was no oversight in that, and it went out to banks and who bought other banks, and we still don't know where all that money is. So I think in Indiana we do a better job of oversight than what the federal government does, but we need to continue to improve that process as well, because and we also don't go into debt. We're not allowed under our Constitution to go into debt, unlike the federal government, which can manufacture their own money, unfortunately. And I do think it's unfortunately because we're all going to have to pay the price in the long run.
Okay, we're going to go this side. Mike Sandifer.
My name is Mike Sandifer, just a resident of Evansville. Is it on? Is it turned?
Should. That should be on now. Can you hear me? Okay, it's on.
Thanks. My name's Mike Sandifer. I guess I'm nobody special. I'm just a law-abiding citizen, a taxpayer, an employer, and I'm kind of upset because I hear about all the problems, but I see government as being the biggest problem we have right now. And I think we've got failures of government on all levels, local, state, and federal. We have an arena here that if it was to be brought to a ballot, it would be voted down. But it's going to be brought to the legislature to be funded. We have a stimulus bill right now that we're talking about. It's $1 billion. And most of that stimulus bill is going to go to more government infrastructure and not to the private sector where the real jobs are created. We have a lot of that money going into education to help train people that have been laid off. Well, I just had to lay off 2 employees. And I can tell you that the best stimulus that I could have was be a tax break. That way I could hire them back instantly, and that would be instant stimulus, not having to wait for 4 years, for 6 years for a highway to get approved. The federal level, same thing. We have a $1 trillion deficit we're getting ready to run there, and we don't know where it's going to go. So at every level of government, we just keep piling on more money and more money and more money, and nobody seems to listen to the people that pay the taxes. When all this adds up, by the time we count the fees and the taxes on taxes, I'm going to be paying 60% of what I make is going to end up going to the government. Even the slave citizens of the Soviet Union got to keep some of their money, got to keep 10 or 15%. So right now, we're only 25% away, or at least I am, from being a slave citizen of the Soviet Union. It's time, and we take all this money and we turn around and then we give it to bureaucrats. That's what the stimulus bill for Indiana is. That's what the stimulus bill, a big portion of that is going to be for the federal government. It's going to go to the bureaucrats where it's going to be mismanaged horribly. It's been that way for 20 years, 30 years, 40 years, ever since FDR, if you want to know the truth. So anyway, I just want to say that I think a gentleman up here mentioned that too. You guys don't seem to get the point. You're not the solution, you're the problem. And until you start listening to the taxpayers and quit spending our money and wasting it and putting our kids in debt forever, this problem is not going to go away.
Representative Van Haften.
Mike, I was hoping you'd be close to the microphone up here because some of the things we're addressing in terms of questions from the crowd obviously deal with the federal stimulus package, which initially were decisions not made by us, but there are issues that we do face at state government. And you mentioned, as a small businessman, tax breaks are the ones that you could have kept those 2 people employed. And I'm curious in regards to what areas in terms of tax breaks would benefit because you're a small businessman. Which type of tax breaks would benefit you the greatest? Because I think of federal taxes, and I think of state taxes, and I think of property taxes. And I know property taxes are one of those that we're dealing with the property tax cap issue right now with the 1, 2, 3. But the decisions I can make at state government, what type of tax breaks can benefit you the best as a small businessman?
I think probably the biggest would be, the biggest is the federal income tax, and FICA and all that. Because we looked at our books and said, hey, we've got 10 employees. Guess what? We're not going to make the tax roll, so we're going to have to cut it. So any taxes that instantly come back to the employer that can go out back into the employees, those are important ones. There's millions of taxes out there, and all of them hurt us. So I guess the issue is the taxes that take away from my employees are the ones that you need to concentrate on.
Okay. And this is not a ducking the question kind of thing, but I don't have, as a state representative, I don't have a vote on changing FICA.
I understand. I understand.
So
but you guys have influence to the federal government as well. I mean,
sure.
And like I say, there's failures at all levels. I'll talk about your stimulus package again.
Right.
I don't approve of it. It's not stimulating anything very quickly. And instead of stimulating things, it's taking money out of the private sector that could create instant jobs.
Okay. And I guess getting back to what I was asking originally is from the state tax standpoint, how the decisions that we make as state representatives or state senators, those types of taxes, and the biggest one that we're confronting is the property tax. So I'm curious what kind of impact that has on you, especially the idea of 1, 2, 3, which your business property would be taxed at, potentially at a higher rate than what your home would.
Yeah, well, basically the type of business we operate, it's a consulting business.
Okay.
So we do not have a lot of property tax per se.
Okay.
So there, from that standpoint, that doesn't impact us, but I'm guessing there's plenty of people out there that it would.
Right. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Anybody else? Okay, we'll go on with another one in the green back here. Oh, there's two people coming forward in the green. Marilee, we let you go first.
I'm Marilee Fowler with the Evansville Convention and Visitors Bureau, and I understand House Bill 1001 passed with the 50% cut still for the tourism budget. I'm hoping that when it gets to the Senate, you will reconsider that. Tourism is an industry that brings people to Indiana as well as Evansville, and they do spend money. So this is a way, again, to keep the economy going. There is one program that we buy into as well as many of the other communities throughout the state, attractions, hotels. We have an opportunity to do a cooperative program with the State Tourism Office. We alone spend $25,000 to place advertisements in the state tourism publication. Well, part of that agreement is when we do that, then the state is then responsible for distributing and getting the word out that this material is available for enticing people to visit. Well, in this current year, the whole advertising campaign for spring has gone away. So we've bought into this program and yet are lacking that engine to get the word out to visitors to come because that is not going to be there. So again, please consider it. We understand it is a trying time. I don't envy any of you with the responsibilities you have. But a 50% cut to a department that can make a difference in the economy of the state is vital. In Evansville alone, for every dollar we spend to promote this community in this county and even this region, there's a $15 return in local and state taxes. So again, it does a lot to bring visitors and especially their pocketbooks. But please reconsider that when you look at it on the Senate side. Thank you.
Okay, Dennis?
Thank you, Marilee, for being here. I agree with you 100%, and I work to restore the cuts in the House version of the budget, but it was not to be the case. It was decided that there would be no increase in funding for tourism, and I thought that was foolish because tourism brings in green jobs. It brings in economic opportunity for restaurants, hotels, and many businesses throughout the state of Indiana, many tourist attractions that we have in Indiana. Believe it or not, we are a pretty attractive place to come once people find out about us, but you have to have tourism promotion for that to happen. And I think it was penny wise and pound foolish for us to accept the governor's recommendations, and these are, again, with the governor's recommendations in this area. We ignored him in so many other areas. I don't know why we didn't also ignore him in this area, but there's still time. The Senate sometimes does things right, and not to pick on my brother and my sister over here, but hopefully the Senate will put additional money in. If they don't, we'll work on it conference committee. I hopefully will be a part of that, and we'll do all I can to get the additional money for tourism in Indiana.
Thank you. I appreciate all of your support.
Either one of you want. Okay, back to this side. The gentleman right here. You're close to the mic. That makes it easy.
I'll explain those packages here in a second. My name is Craig Blessinger. I'm a sergeant with the Vandenberg County Sheriff's Office, and I also serve as the president of the Vandenberg County Deputies Organization, which represents 100-plus deputies on our department. The reason why I am here today is to express our opposition to annexation. And most of you probably know, annexation is occurring not only on the state level, but currently it's widespread here in Vandenberg County. There are some exponential effects of the annexation that I would like to express to you, not only for us as deputies, but for taxpayers. First of all, as a taxpayer myself, almost in every annexation that has occurred, taxes have gone up for the citizens. That's almost guaranteed in any annexation. Secondly, as far as deputies are concerned, we want to continue to provide the professional and compassionate services that we provided, and specifically here in the county, since the inception of the county. And that right now is jeopardized because of the annexation efforts. And again, we are opposed to that. We don't want it to affect our jobs, because what will happen is they take away that territory. They're going to say, you don't need the jobs. Your pensions are affected because we are a self-supported pension, and also our families are affected because of the possible job losses. So those are some of the exponential effects, not as a deputy but as a taxpayer as well. Senate Bill 114, and that is one that deals specifically with the annexation of it. I just want to read a quick excerpt, and I'll try to make this quickly as possible. It says the bill places restrictions on annexation by municipalities to prohibit unwanted or hostile annexations. Municipalities would be able to annex land only under certain circumstances, and requires that municipalities submit annexation fiscal plans to the Indiana Department of Local Government Finance for approval. And here's the crux, and what I want to try to convey to you folks. It says the measure also reduces from 65% to 51% the number of property owners needed for remonstrance to stop an annexation. As you probably well know, the current laws state that the citizens, in order to fight annexation, there are two ways. They have to get petitions from 75% of the assessed valuation in that area, or 65% of the property owners. Now, knowing from personal experience what we're going through right now, that is a very, very high threshold to fight annexation and for citizens to react to their government. Our government was founded on the premise of giving power to the people. The way the law is stated currently, that is quite the opposite, and it actually gives more power to the government as opposed to the citizens to express their voice. What I would like to know is if each of you support, and just a quick yes or no would suffice, if you would mind, if you support this current legislation, which lowers that threshold from that 65% down to the 51%, which allows people to be able to remonstrate against the annexation. Now, I'd just like to get your opinions on that, please.
Senator Doug.
I just have a quick question. Where is the Senate bill? Did it come out of committee?
And I was going to ask you, I've done as much research as I can, and I don't know where it stood in the House, and if this is the current bill, the way it stands. So I cannot answer that myself.
I've been on local government elections the last few years, and this year I'm not. And we every year we fight with this, yes, and it never comes out of the committee. And kind of curious if it even came out of the committee. I assume it probably died because we haven't seen it on the floor yet.
Well, actually, I believe from what I've read on the website, I believe it did come out of committee, and it looks like it passed back in January of last year. So I don't know if it stalled somewhere or where it has.
That was last year, so it did die.
Yeah, I figured that would be because I haven't seen anything recently.
So, well, we can look at it, but I haven't seen it as of yet, and I have a hard time believing it even passed out of committee this year.
Again, I'd like to get each of your comments, yes or no, if you support this legislation that gives power back to the people and gives them an easier opportunity to remonstrate against the annexation.
I would support it, but I guess, first of all, is that a bill number from this year or is it from last year?
It's, to be honest, ma'am, it's very difficult to track this.
Okay.
If you're not up there, and I've done as much as I possibly can, and we've had correspondence through several of you, and a lot of the deputies have corresponded back and forth with you to try to get this information, and it's difficult to pull off of the website to keep. So I'm doing the best I can personally.
Certainly, I'll look into it. I certainly support giving more ability to people if they want to fight annexation.
Yes, ma'am.
And I think the city needs to prove its case. They really need to prove its case. But I don't know where this bill, I don't recall this bill from this session, so I'll certainly look into what the status is.
I believe it was Senator Lewis, and I believe Senator Buck may have introduced it originally.
Okay.
Representative Avery?
I haven't seen the bill to start with, and I'm really a little bit jealous. That seemed like all the interesting bills are in the Senate this year, but I've not seen that bill and not debated that bill. I've over the years supported several bills that made it more difficult for annexation, as Vanita says, to make it there a certainty that the city will provide the necessary services to the area being annexed. But I always reserve an opinion until I've read a subject matter, and I obviously cannot make a decision until I've actually seen it or actually heard the discussion on it. But I do appreciate your comments,
yes,
so
sir.
I appreciate the packet too.
Yes, sir. And by the way, those are petitions signed by 90% of the deputies stating their opposition as well.
Thank you.
Craig, I know this always sounds like a cop-out answer when somebody asks a question about a little piece of it, not because I've said, well, yeah, that sounds great.
Yes, sir.
And I've gone back and read the entire bill and thought, in that context, it's great. The overall concept of the bill, it's horrible. Yes, generally, giving an opportunity for people to be heard is the best route to go. I also think if there is annexation to be taking place, that it should be proven that it is needed.
Yes, sir.
Some of the more metropolitan areas, you don't see a line between the city and the county, and I think that's one of the things you run into with the whole annexation issue. Stepping back even from a higher altitude, if you will, I also am concerned as to how the movement in annexation plays with consolidation, and not just in the issue of Vanderburgh County, but in other places where there seems to be a push to basically create one government within a county. So
Are you in favor of that generally? Consolidation?
Generally, no.
No?
Okay. Because the 92 counties are all different.
Sure.
I've said this before. I said, it's the push seems to be coming from areas like Clark County and Clarksville and Allen County and Fort Wayne, which is a heck of a lot different than where I live in Posey County. It's just a different situation. But I support a case being made on both sides of it. So if that means moving that number back, then that would be supportive of that.
Thank you.
Okay, Representative Regan.
Thank you. And of course I haven't read the bill either, but I would say reducing. You're talking about reducing the percentage of people that would need to remonstrate.
Yes, ma'am, because it's very difficult at this point, and we're experiencing that right now.
And as I understand, that would be one of the thresholds that would need to be considered. There are others that the city can investigate, and even with the 51% or 65%, can't the property can still be assessed. It's only one of the numbers of issues I think that can be addressed.
Right, and the 51% just basically gets you the remonstration to get you into court to battle it. So from there, again, the citizens are still at a disadvantage because of the monetary funds that it costs to hire somebody legally, and to combine forces as citizens, the odds are all weighed against the citizens, and the law is written specifically for the government and the cities, and it makes it difficult for the citizens to remonstrate.
Sure. So as long as you understand that, you'd still have those other roadblocks.
Yes,
but
ma'am.
it sounds like a good idea.
Okay. Thank you for your time. Appreciate it.
Okay, we're going back to this side, in the front row here in the purple.
Did she speak earlier? Not to cut you off.
I don't think so.
Oh, okay. Someone in purple did. Was there?
It's a noticeable color, I guess.
That's right.
That's good this morning, I suppose. My name is Carol Oglesby, and I live in Vanderburgh County. And basically, what I would like to bring up this morning, and we've touched on it, or we discussed it in Spencer County, and we've touched on it in different ways here. Okay. We've touched on it in different ways here from what other people have said. But this is we've talked about jobs, we've talked about health, government intervention, but we've been fooled before in this region and in other places in the country about the coal industry. And first of all, there is no clean coal. There are scrubbers. There are things that make it less dirty. But there is no clean coal, and a lot of the technologies that we're talking about now are not proven. And whereas we can talk about being concerned about cost of coal, certainly my veteran bills are something I'm not very happy about, especially in view of all the power outages that we've had lately. But the cost of coal is not just what you see in that monthly power bill, but when you look at the enormous health consequences that are documented from coal burning, it is the most expensive fuel source out there. And while we can say that, yes, there are medications to treat some of these health conditions, but that's not really an acceptable response, because it's not necessary for anyone to have to suffer for the purposes of jobs or for the purposes of us to have energy. We have evidence that a fetus that you're carrying when you're in an area that has certain pollutants that we have can develop all types of birth defects. There are also many miscarriages as a result of exposure to these toxins. We also have a huge increase in our children suffering from asthma. Some, fortunately, will survive. Others may not survive that. We have our elderly. And we have others that are developing forms of cancer that require excruciating forms of treatment. We see our other friends and families die earlier than they should from cardiovascular events that are a direct result of the pollution. So I'm basically asking you not to be fooled again by the promises of increased taxes, increased jobs. There are other ways to get jobs. And the idea of clean coal. I'm running out of time, but I just want to encourage you not to be fooled again by the same old story and false promises that we've seen in the past. And Spencer County certainly has lived it. They're not fooled any longer. Let's not us be fooled any longer either. Thank you.
Thank you. Since we discussed this issue earlier, are there any responses up here? That woman in the green right here.
That's Mary.
Yes, it's Mary Bennett. On the issue I wanted to talk about first of all, but I want to say something else quickly, is the smoking
bill because I was really disappointed that the guts were taken out of that. I think that we know that if you are working in a factory or various things, that OSHA comes in and requires that there is a clean environment for people to work in. And I think we should require the same thing when people are employed. Jobs are a difficulty at this time, and people have to get the jobs that they can get. And if they happen to work in a casino or a tavern, and that's the only job they can find, they shouldn't have to be exposed to toxins that we know from all of the research. I don't know if there's anything anyone can do about that. But very quickly, I wanted to say something else, because there are so many people here talking about tax and we're paying too much taxes. We had a lot of tax breaks federally under the last administration, and what happened? Our economy went down the drain. We need to pay taxes for police. I want to have an army. I want to have an air force. I want to have the trash picked up. I want the police and the fire department, and we have to pay taxes for those things. I'm sorry, I don't like paying taxes any more than anyone else. But anyway, that was just my extra. The smoking is my real issue.
Okay, Senator Doug.
I just had a quick question for Mary. Your accent, Mary, are you from Kentucky?
Somewhere like that. It's actually Hoosier now by adoption.
Representative Avery.
The ban on smoking in public places passed the House the other day, and as you're quite correct, it was, shall we say, amended dramatically, and it's actually weaker than the Vanderbilt County or the Evansville ordinances that passed. But nevertheless, it is a statewide ban on smoking in certain places, public places. I asked on my questionnaire this year. I think it's the first time that I ever asked that question. Was should there be a complete ban on smoking in all workplaces in Indiana? And I thought, that would probably be a close vote, but it turned out it was 71% of my constituents said yes, there should be a complete ban on smoking in public places. It's not just an annoyance, because secondhand smoke harms people, it causes disease, but workers should not be forced. It's a workplace safety issue too. Workers shouldn't be forced to endure the smoke of other people. I do believe people have a right to smoke in the privacy of wherever they're private, but not when they expose children and other people to their habit. But anyhow, thank you very much for your comments, and it did pass, and perhaps again the Senate has an opportunity to improve upon the bill.
Representative Van Haften.
Thank you, Mary. And the House Bill 1213, the Comprehensive Smoking Ban Bill, came through Public Policy Committee, a committee in which I chair. So I did give that a hearing. We had about 4 hours of testimony. Quite honestly, this is one of those issues where I'm not sure you're going to change the minds of either side of this issue with anything you present or anything you discuss. The bill, a comprehensive ban amongst the members of the committee, would not have passed out of committee. So there was basically a question of whether do we just kill the bill now and the issue is done for the session, or do we try to look at what some of the concerns have been expressed on both sides and fashion something that maybe someone can vote for. I worked with the ranking minority member on the committee and listened to both of sides of our membership, and we did, whether you want to look at it in terms of gutting the bill or look at it in terms of putting exemptions in there that still created some sense of people making decisions. Either way you want to look at that, we put exemptions in there. It came to the floor of the House in the next step of the process, and it was amended further by members of the floor of the House. I think one of the significant items in terms of the amendment on the floor of the House was basically sending it to a certain degree back to local control, putting in a statewide ban with exemptions. But if a local unit of government has already or wanted to in the future go stronger than the ban with exemptions, then they could do so. That is the bill that passed out of the House. It'll now go to the Senate. I'm not sure how the Senate is going to approach it, but in answering one of the questions earlier, I said the challenging part about this job is trying to listen to all sides and figuring out what you can do, because I know there are some folks out there that think they're 100% right 100% of the time, and that's one of the things I don't believe that I am, so that's why you got to listen and try to come up with something that addresses as many needs as you can.
Senator Becker?
Traditionally, this bill would come to the Health Committee. It could go anywhere. I mean, I think we'll improve it if it comes to the Health Committee in particular. But one thing you have to keep in mind is you do, as Representative Van Haften said, you have to have a bill that you can get consensus on. And for 150 people that come from all different parts of the state, that's very difficult to do. And I think it's important to leave the ability for local government to make their decisions if they want to make it a stronger ban that they can. I think that it definitely we should not preempt. And I think the first thing the county commissioners did was to weaken, which I found real ironic considering that I asked the same question that Representative Avery asked about a statewide ban, and it was about 80% of my constituents supported a statewide ban that responded back on smoking in public places and workplaces. So I don't know, because it's going to be very difficult. The casino industry is opposed to it, and they say people won't come to gamble if they can't smoke. And I really think if you treat everybody the same, all businesses have the same, where are they going to go? They're going to come to your facility, or they're not going to go at all. So I just don't think most states that have passed this ban have not found it to be detrimental to business whatsoever, because it creates an even playing field for everybody. And I think that's the key, is not to leave, if you're going to do something, not to leave one industry better off than somebody else.
Representative Rican?
Thank you. There is one portion of the bill that I considered stronger than what we have here, and that has to do with the fact that if there is a person under 18 that is served at the restaurant, it's a total ban. Now, I'm sure that's the restaurant or the tavern or the sports bar, and I can see where that would really affect a sports bar, so it is stronger.
Okay, let's go back to the gentleman in the very back in the orange hat.
Good morning. I'm Mike Finn. I wanted to address the question that we had about the state funds. The state treasurer is responsible for investing those funds. The state law is outlined on the permissible investments that they are able to make with those funds. Basically, it's certificates of deposit and treasury notes, agencies of the federal government. And there's a maximum time period that they can invest those funds. So there are no investments in the stock market with the major move funds or anything along that line. Now, interest rates have come down. That's why the projections that were made a few years ago when that money was put into place, was put into place is a lot less. But that money is not lost. It's there. It's government agency bonds. So hopefully that answers the question along that line. Excuse me. The second thing, there's been a lot of talk about the stimulus bill that was signed by the president. I firmly disagree with that. In my opinion, we're going to see tax rates double where they are right now in a few years. And I agree with what you said. They're giving us the money. What do? I think we need to band together as a state and the other governors in the other states and reject those funds. We will never be able to pay those back. Anyway, you don't need to respond on that. But the other thing that just came out the other day that I'm surprised I have not heard any talk about, and that is the bailout of my neighbor who could not afford his home. I certainly do not want to pay for my neighbor's home. I love my neighbor. They're great people. But if they could not afford to live there, they have to pay that consequence. We do need to stop the housing decline. That's going to be one of the things that has to happen first in order for the economy to turn around. However, me bailing out my neighbor is not the answer to that. And I don't think there's anyone else in this room that wants to do that as well.
I think that we're about tapped out on this issue, so I'm going to go to something new. The lady in the green. There's lots of ladies in green in here today.
Green and purple must be, yeah. I'm Karen Lipinzik. I'm a pastor at a UCC church in Posey County. And first, let me say thank you to Senator Dyke and to Representative Van Haften. My husband got sick due to toxins in the soil in Posey County and lost his job, and we couldn't get unemployment. He's been filing since December. Within a week of calling both of your offices, we got word that he will be receiving unemployment. So thank you first for that. I think that's evidence of how our government works in America, as do I think this gathering is another sign of citizenry interacting with our elected politicians. And so what you do is almost the most thankless job in the world, and so thank you for doing it. On the other hand, I also would say that I believe, especially in these times, and we've talked a lot about the economy, that it is a partnership that we are engaged in, and that it does take communities, and it does take the involved citizenry to address the issues. And so I would like you to consider when the bill moves, Senate Bill 91 moves to the floor, which is the hate crimes bill, that you would seriously consider support of that. Hate crimes is terrorism, and America is strongly opposed to terrorism on a global scale, but in our communities, terrorism exists in the lives of women, gay folks, lesbian folks, transgendered folks, disabled people. A crime that is committed as an assault. It is not controlling how we think, what we believe, what we have the freedom to say, but we are not, as a community, we cannot allow assault and violence to happen against citizens simply because someone believes that their behavior, their lifestyle, their very personhood is wrong. So I simply encourage you to vote in favor of that when it moves to the floor. Thank you.
I mean, is it even being considered?
I don't even. Do you know, Karen, where that bill is?
I don't know, except that it's Senate Bill 91.
Okay. It's still in committee, I'm sure. Whether you agree with it or not, it's probably not going anywhere. Okay.
Okay, back to this side. I'm sorry, Senator Dyke.
Just one comment. Thanks for your thanking Representative Van Haften and I. We appreciate that.
Yes, ma'am. This is the day for green.
My name's Ann, and if I were going to give you guys anything, I'd want to give you each one a belt, because that's what all of us out here have been doing. We've got another notch, and we have elected you to public office to serve us in the state. And what we want you to do, we're here to keep your feet right underneath the fire. And none of us want your job. It's hard. We understand that this is a difficult time, not just for our nation, but it's a difficult time for our state too. And as I've listened to this gentlewoman on the front row here, who has a legitimate plea. These folks in Rockport, I've had mercury poisoning. This man back here who talks about the coal issues, and this lady who talks about firemen, and this other man who talked about he was a deputy sheriff. All of them have legitimate causes. But I think we're divided here, folks. There are some of us that are here today because we have things that we would like for you to support. There's a whole other section of us here. We're here because we're afraid. We're looking straight at you, and we are in stark fear, not just for ourselves, but for our children. We are, hate's a bad word, we're upset. We're upset to hear, because we feel like you have said, Ms. Becker, Senator Becker, we feel that we have placed our children and our grandchildren at risk because of the decisions that have been made, and we don't agree with them. For all of those who, and it was a special occasion, but have you seen this movie Clint Eastwood has done called Gran Torino? Mm-hmm. For those of you who don't know, of course, everybody knows Clint, but for those of you who don't know, he lived in, he was a retired serviceman, and he lived in an Asian community where there were a lot of bullies. And the bullies were messing around with the whole neighborhood. They were just controlling all of it. And Clint decided enough was enough. And you know what? I've heard some guy speak out here, and he said, you know what? Enough's enough. I've had it. And thank you. I would like for you to understand that we are thankful that you're willing to serve. But we want you to safeguard our state. We want you to keep our state a safe place to be. And because of our fear, we're looking to you to make those kinds of decisions for us in everything, all of it. Thanks.
Well, Ann, thanks for coming in from Posey County. I don't do this just for the fun of it. I don't leave my wife every Sunday night and not get back home till Thursday or Friday night. I try my best to recognize the concerns that exist out there, and I try my best to figure out what's the best solution for those concerns. So, and I will say one of the biggest positives of this job is coming here to be able to listen to you, listen to others, because I said before, you can't know everything about everything, and the only way I'm going to learn anything is to listen to those that are affected. We're all scared. We're all scared. In our household, we're under a significant change in the way things are going to be, at least in the next year. So there's some nervousness on my end of it. But I also know that if we work together, when there are differences, if we can try our best to work out those differences, because we've seen differences already this morning, we're going to be better off. But I hope you understand, and everybody understands, that this is something that we're here because we want to try to help. If I'm not doing this tomorrow, I move on, and I thank the people of my district for giving me the opportunity to do this for the period of time they did. But do never hesitate to come to these things, to express yourself, because that is the only way government works, is if the people make it work.
If you want to track how a bill moves, all you have to do is look at the one of the things in the Bill Watch, or one of the things in that site is a Bill Watch. You can click on Bill Watch, identify the particular bill number that you're wanting to track, and you can get emails that will tell you where it's at and what the status of it is. It also tells you who sponsored it. So if you're looking to try to have some influence on a particular bill, the first thing you want to do is try to touch base with a sponsor, whether they're your representative or not. Your own representative is still going to find out, hopefully, what you have to say about it, because eventually, if it makes it out of committee, especially if your representative is in committee, in that particular committee, they'll have a voice on it, but they will have a voice when it gets to the floor. So there's a couple of ways to track bills and get an understanding of it. That said, housekeeping chores out of the way. So many issues, so many issues. First one I want to bring up is about, and we will test the idea of, you haven't cut anybody off yet, but I guess I may be the first. But at any rate, there are several bills, all relating to a renewable energy standard. One of them is 1305. It's had an amendment on it, which basically considers coal, which I'm not going to talk about very much, but it considers coal a renewable resource. Scientifically and technically, that's correct. It takes a couple million years for that to happen, because basically coal is formed by decaying of matter, of organic matter. That's what causes coal to exist. It takes a couple million years or more for that to happen. But yes, that is renewable. We also have to think about the amount of jobs that's going to be created with a renewable energy standard, which basically requires a percentage of the electricity that gets generated in the state of Indiana to be done by renewable resources such as wind and solar, and even geothermal, renewable resources. That's what we have to think about. The cost of those fuels, the cost of wind is free. So the cost of the fuel is free. The cost of the sun is free, except, of course, for however much you want to pay for suntan lotion. That's the cost of the sun, one of the costs of the sun. So we have to start thinking about how we look at the future and how things are going to progress into the future. Yes, jobs can be lost, but overall there will be a net gain in jobs. To show you how that happens, somebody's going to have to make and manufacture solar panels. Somebody's going to have to install them. Somebody is going to have to service them. Somebody's going to have to do the same thing with wind turbines. Somebody's going to have to do all that work, and there's lots of jobs associated with causing that to happen. Granted, we can provide some incentives for folks to be retrained, which we kind of need to be doing all the time anyway. But we do have to recognize that eventually we've got to move into the future. I'm not sure how many people I heard crying and are willing to throw their computers away because it damaged the typewriter industry. It actually destroyed the typewriter industry, the advent of computers. The advent of the automobile destroyed the buggy and the buggy whip industry. It literally destroyed those. It also destroyed the big shovel. Well, it didn't really destroy the big shovel industry that some people carried behind the horses, but it really damaged it. So it did damage a lot of industries. So you have to kind of think about the amount of net jobs that are going to be created by this. And actually, it didn't destroy the buggy whip industry either. You just don't buy them at buggy whip stores anymore. There are other stores that you buy them at. They don't call them buggy whips. But start thinking about how we're going to move into the future. How are we going to start thinking about some of that stuff? And one way to kind of start that is to look at how much the fuel cost. The cost of solar is free. The cost of wind is free. So I would encourage you to try to encourage some jobs that are associated with renewable industry. We do have wind power here in Indiana that is just as strong as some of the other states. In fact, stronger than some that already have some of these, especially on the East Coast, already have a renewable energy standard. So we're not the first. We're not breaking new ground. There's over 20 states. I think last count was 21 states that had some kind of a renewable energy standard. And we need to move in that kind of a direction. So I would ask you to support those bills and try to pull out the idea. I'm not sure what's happened with that specific amendment because that's going on right now in 1305. The amendment, the only one I know about is 1305 where the coal has been amended into it to call it renewable. That amendment kind of needs to be pulled back out. So what we kind of need to be doing is thinking about all that. So I'd appreciate it if you would support at least the concept. Granted, look at each bill and what everything is included in it. And thank you for your service.
Okay, well, we don't have much time to end this, so because it is the ending hour at 11:30. Jim, I appreciate your having been the moderator. It's a little tougher up here than I ever thought it would be.
Well, the legislators, it's easy for the legislators. Just do what I want. That's all I need. That's the only thing.
Again, I appreciate everybody coming. We had a great crowd today, and we'll be back here in 4 weeks.